Captain Crunch, the cereal named after me.
When you walk down the cereal aisle, do you ever get the feeling that Captain Crunch is looking at you? Well, that's just silly. He's actually looking at your kids. That's according to a study by Brian Wansink and colleagues at Cornell University's Food and Brand Lab. The researchers wondered whether the characters on cereal boxes actually make eye contact, and whether that could influence a shopper's choice of breakfast fare. So they hit the cereal aisle, and they found that kids' cereals tend to be placed on lower shelves than grown-up offerings. What's more, Tony the Tiger and his kid-friendly pals tend to gaze downward, while the Quaker Oats guy stares straight ahead. In a second study, adult volunteers were handed a box of tricks. On some boxes, the rabbit looked straight ahead. On others, he gazed away. When asked what they thought of Trix, it seems that folks felt more connected to the brand and said they preferred that cereal over others when the rabbit looked them in the eye.
I forgot to take the Trix. Tricks are for kids.
The results, which appear in the Journal of Environment and Behavior, suggest that certain tricks are not just for kids, but may be for marketers too.
You might blame your pets for shedding all over the house, but we humans do it too, and our stuff is alive.
We're constantly emitting microbes around us, and this is coming from shedding of our skin, from exhaling, our hair, and we're just full of these guys.
Adam Altrichter, a microbial ecologist at the University of Oregon.
We've never been sterile organisms. We are definitely masses of microbes, both in and on us.
If you're picturing the Peanuts character Pigpen, you may not be far off, because biologists estimate we shed 1 million particles an hour, including, of course, a lot of bacteria. Altrichter and his colleagues wanted to measure that cloud of particles, the Pigpen effect, if you will. So they asked 11 volunteers not to shower, dressed them in shorts and tank tops, and put them in a sterile chamber for hours at a time, while collecting microbial samples on surfaces and in the air. What they found in those samples was a menagerie of bacteria, from the volunteers' skin, guts, genital tracts, lungs, noses, and mouths. And for 8 of the 11 study subjects, the microbial cloud was unique enough to identify the individual who'd left it, suggesting that this bacterial fingerprint could someday be used in forensics. The study is in the journal PeerJ. Given that we spend 90% of our lives indoors, our microbial clouds also colonize the places we live and work, and yes, the people around us.
It's just kind of interesting to think about how the people that we interact with at work or in classrooms or other environments, how we could be sharing some of these microbial passengers between us, not even knowing anything about it.
And now that you do know about it, hopefully your view of your coworkers won't become clouded.
Physicists at the Brookhaven National Laboratory have been able to send information ahead of particle beams racing at nearly the speed of light. And the message to the beams is, get in line. This technique has been developed at other labs, but never used before with particle beams traveling in discrete bunches. These bunches are important in recreating that singular moment, the Big Bang. In these experiments, there are 2 different sets of ions, electrically charged particles, zooming towards each other around a 2.4-mile track. They collide into one another to recreate conditions that provide info about the Big Bang, but the ions spread out as they move, and this means there are fewer collisions. In a technique called stochastic cooling, scientists first measure fluctuations in the beams of ions. Then they send signals even faster than these particles to devices up ahead that can kick those particles back into shape. Researchers say this technique allows them to create these collisions much more frequently and cheaply than other methods. And so they can get more and better data about what our universe might have been like just after it came into existence.
Veteran sports writer and journalism professor Justice B. Hill on August 1st at the annual meeting of the National Association of Black Journalists in Orlando. But that resolution won't be easy.
The science will always stay ahead of the detection. I did an interview recently with a bioethicist from Case Western Reserve University, and one of the things he advocates is let players use whatever they want to under doctor supervision. Because he understands, I did a piece years ago where I was talking to one of the foremost authorities on PEDs, and one of the things he said that we're going to get into gene cloning. The sophistication of the technology is going to make this detection game even more dicier in the years to come. And I think baseball, the union, and all of them are tired of the discussion of steroids. They want to get back to playing of the game. And that's a huge issue for those of us who love baseball.
It's both painful and insulting to rub salt in a wound, but a new study shows that salty skin can actually ward off infections, at least in mice fed a high-sodium diet. That's according to a study in the journal Cell Metabolism. We tend to think of dietary salt as a health threat, and it is. Too much sodium's been linked to high blood pressure and an increased risk for heart attack and stroke. But we also crave salty snacks and store the accumulated sodium in our bodies, particularly in the skin. A clue to explaining this paradox came when researchers noticed that mice that were attacked by a cage mate wound up with an unusually large amount of sodium at the site of the bite. They then found high sodium levels in people at the locations of bacterial skin infections. So the researchers fed mice a high sodium diet and found that the dietary salt boosted the activity of immune cells in the animal's skin, which gave them a leg up when it came to healing their wounds. The findings could lead to treatments that would help us assault infections, without having to resort to pretzels, potato chips, or pickles.
How much do you think grade point average should factor into university admission decisions? Depends on race, actually. At least that's what one survey suggests. The University of California Survey Research Center randomly dialed nearly 600 white adults within the state. They asked half the respondents how important GPA should be in determining admissions to the UC system. They asked the other half the same question, but prefaced it with the fact that Asians make up nearly 40% of the UC student body, 3 times their share of the state's population. Turns out the white group aware of the Asian population placed less importance on GPA, presumably, says sociologist Frank Sampson, because they felt that that particular measure of merit was benefiting Asian students, and not them. Sampson presented the findings at a recent meeting of the American Sociological Association in New York. There's one twist. When respondents were asked to consider competition by blacks as well as Asians, they went back to upping the importance of GPA, possibly to exclude black students they presume would score lower. All of which suggests our opinions about academic merit may be more biased than we'd like to admit.
Those clever little monkeys are on strike again, and I don't mean the Writers Guild. No, I'm talking about the tufted capuchin monkeys at the Yerkes Primate Research Center. Those headstrong primates have put down their feet, all 4 of them, and refused to work for unfair wages. Their grievances are presented in the current online edition of the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. To examine Capuchin's sense of fairness, Franz de Waal and his colleagues at Emory University designed a bartering task, in which monkeys are given tokens they can then exchange for food. Some monkeys get a plain old cucumber slice, others get a coveted grape. What the researchers discovered is that when monkeys who get salad fixins see their friends get fruit, they basically refuse to play anymore. But are the monkeys really reacting to inequity, thinking, that's not fair, she got a grape and I didn't? Or are they just being greedy? I see grapes, I want one. Or maybe they're frustrated. Last time I got a grape, now this? The current study suggests that the grapeless monkeys indeed consider themselves shortchanged. Tests to see what they might type, given an infinite amount of time, are on hold until both labor disputes are settled.
Comparisons of different animals have shown that larger brains provide greater intelligence, but they also guzzle more energy and have other consequences. Now scientists have observed the effects of varying brain size within a single species, guppies. The work is in Current Biology. Swedish researchers bred 2 different lines of guppies, selecting one for larger brains and one for smaller. The fish quickly modified until brains were 9% larger in the big brain line than in the other. Not surprisingly, when 48 guppies were given learning tests, large-brained female fish outperformed small-brained females. However, males from both lines scored about the same, possibly because the female guppy's visual system was more suited to the type of intelligence test used. But big brains also had a downside. The brainier fish had smaller guts, by 20% for males and 8% for females. Plus, the large-brained guppies produced 19% fewer offspring. In order to provide energy to their bigger brains, the egghead fish made sacrifices that may be evolutionary disadvantages. It may indeed be possible to be too smart for your own good.